Do you found the skeleton? How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. Hopefully I have sorted out my mic placement and sound even more amazing this time around. Speaking of sound, here's how this video originally sounded.
As though Mother Nature has some intended goal that she sets out to achieve. The bacteria want to survive.
I had to spend a fair bit of time cleaning it up and dealing with corrupted files. So while the audio on the original video isn't great, it's a lot better than it used to be. Anyway, I'm here to respond to Jay Seegert. I don't think I've covered him before, but for some reason I'm convinced I know that name from somewhere. Anyway, he's here to tell us whether evolution is probable or problematic. I appreciate the alliteration, and this seems like it's going to be a grab bag of all sorts of creationist claims. Let's dive into it after whatever pastor is hosting Jay is done introducing him.
I have a very exciting talk for you. It's very unique. The first part of it's going to cover some basic things about how evolution supposedly works.
Put in the comments how many things you think he'll strawman in the first half.
And the last half or third or so is going to get into stuff that's really unique, really powerful, and also really easy to understand.
You know, I hear certain Christians describe things like Bible verses or sermons as powerful, and I don't really know what that means. I was an evangelical back in the 1990s, and even then, I only really thought of the word used in context like this to just mean profound or thought-provoking. But is that really all it means?
And it's one of the most powerful evidences that I know as to why evolution just isn't possible. So we'll be getting into that.
He's saving the best for last. I guess that means you're going to have to watch every part of this, too.
You know a little bit about my background. I usually say you may not know me from a hole in the ground, so I'll go over a little bit more background. There's me.
Yeah, he's going to do some jokes and intro stuff. I don't care to air that. He says that he was raised as a Christian and his mom led him to Jesus. Now, I don't really have much trauma or anything from my evangelical past. I guess I was lucky like that. But one thing I do remember being distressing is how the soteriology of this brand of Christianity interacts with children raised in the religion. You see, if you think that your eternal fate depends on whether or not you've asked Jesus into your heart, and according to the adults in your life, that's supposed to come as some big conversion event, but you've just always been raised within the religion, you don't actually have a conversion event, and you probably never will. But that raises the anxiety that maybe you're not actually saved. I mean, all the adults around you have a testimony about their conversion experience and their come to Jesus moment. I later learned that, yeah, those testimonies are, shall we say, embellished in many cases, and are less about conversion experiences than times of stress and anxiety in which those people leaned on their religion for strength, which I'm not knocking. Life is hard, and if your religion and the community associated with it help you to get through tough times, then good. I think that's when religious communities are at their best. But the thing is that this kind of soteriology is harmful to children. If you've experienced that stress and anxiety, I'm sorry. And people like Seegert should be too. We're going to cut back in with Jay discussing his university experience with professors who weren't feeding him lies, which he seems to have taken exception to.
They were all evolutionists. Some of them were atheists, and they were telling me that everything I believed was wrong.
First, I highly doubt that. I have been to university. I know several university professors and students. None of them are telling students that their beliefs are wrong or have been told that all their beliefs are wrong. Professors are there to teach the subject they teach, and yeah, if something we know in that subject goes against your beliefs, they'll teach it anyway. But they're also not here to convert you to atheism or whatever. Hey, Christians, you're not being oppressed when scholars tell you that you're wrong about something. But hey, if you want to actually help with real persecution of Christians, may I suggest helping out the St. Thomas Christians of India, an ethno-religious group that has been in India for nearly 2,000 years that was shattered by European colonialism. Or the Church of the East, which was scattered into diaspora as a direct and indirect result of the United States invading Iraq. Or the Coptic Orthodox Church, which is still facing kidnapping, forced conversions, and marriages and bombings. Or the Eastern Orthodox Christians of Palestine and Syria, who are having their churches destroyed and worshippers killed by terrorists, including the Israeli government. You could actually do some good in the world by helping these people. You know, since the Bible has a lot to say about helping the foreigner, the orphan, the poor, and the widow. I don't know, maybe focus on the parts of the Bible that actually encourage doing good in the world instead of trying to drag science back in time 3 millennia.
And that made me very uncomfortable.
Wow, a white cisgender straight Christian man was made to feel uncomfortable. We should probably have the FBI look into this.
to be surrounded by those PhD scientists who I assumed they had a lot of evidence for what they believed.
A reasonable assumption, provided that the things they're assumed to be knowledgeable about are things that they teach and study, and not just random other stuff in which they have no expertise.
And I realized for the first time in my entire life that, yeah, I know what I believe, I just don't know why.
It's pretty obvious he believed because he saw the adults he trusted most in his life performing credibility-enhancing displays in the form of costly signaling through things like being cringy evangelists, spending time involved in not obviously productive activities like public prayers, Bible reading, etc. And he was also told that his response to the creedal statements of his parents' religion were the most important thing about him. That's why he believed. Now, those reasons may be different now, but at the very least, since up to this point he had not examined his beliefs about Christianity, I can say I'm right about why he believed with a high degree of confidence.
I couldn't defend the Christian worldview.
Something tells me that nothing about that has changed between then and now. I mean, he's a young earth creationist, and so, like with flat earthers and anti-vaxxers, it's basically impossible for him to be able to defend what he believes. Remember, among young earth creationists, well-informed and honest, you can't get more than 2.
I won't go into it now. I mentioned that I assumed my professors had evidence for what they believed, but I didn't have any for what I believed. I found out later they had nothing. And I mean literally nothing. I asked every one of my physics professors and thermodynamics and geology and all that. They didn't give me one example evidence to back up what they believed. That's a whole other story. But so anyway.
I'm calling bullshit, but I guess he doesn't want to go into it. After this, he gives a little story about how he started a ministry. Again, I don't care about these autobiographical details. I'll skip until there is something that I do care about. He also takes a weirdly long time to verbally fillet John Sanford. I didn't know he was in a throuple with Sanford and Sal Cordova. How progressive. And to think, I had earlier called him straight. My apologies to Jay. He also lets us know that he does Grand Canyon tours, and that may be where I've heard of this guy before. I kind of want to take a Creationist Grand Canyon tour. It would be surreal. Apparently, going on one of his tours will prove to you that Jesus is God and that the earth is young. That seems like a tall order, but I'm not going to let a creationist advertise on my channel. By the way, I cut out more than 11 minutes of this talk because it was all just commercials for his own ministry.
Now, how many of you ever seen Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
I have seen it.
A number of you. Kind of a dangerous program to watch. You might find out that maybe you're not.
Really, what you'll find out is that particularly bright children who are currently studying various things know more about those things than an average adult who is not studying those things. But ask those fifth graders about, say, your job, and they'll probably sound dumb. That's just how learning works.
We're going to change this up a bit and ask, are you smarter than a PhD scientist?
In some areas, yes. In some cases. I have PhD scientists ask me about things that they don't understand, but that I do, probably weekly. But what I don't do is think that I'm smarter than they are about their field of study. I don't assume Maddie is dumb every time I encounter something about meteorology that I don't understand or that seems counterintuitive, because she's the one who has spent years and years studying the topic. But let's be real here about what's going on. Jay is trying to encourage the evangelical tendency towards anti-intellectualism.
Now, most people would say, well, of course not. I mean, those guys are brilliant. I honestly believe after you hear this presentation, you truly will be smarter than most PhD scientists when it comes to the creation versus evolution controversy.
Damn, my X button just broke from all that doubting I just did.
Why is it? Is it because those scientists aren't very smart? Oh no, they're really smart. So I never argue with that. These scientists, skeptics, atheists, whatever, they're really, really intelligent. Obviously, the Bible says there's a big difference between intelligence and wisdom.
So does the D&D Player's Handbook. But geez, this guy can't get to the point. I'm skipping until a point.
Most PhD scientists don't even really know about evolution.
That's true for most PhD scientists for most things. Outside of their area of study, they're lay people.
They're making rocket fuel, cell phones, curing diseases. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff. They're not studying evolution. That's not their area. They're smart people, and they know their area.
And that's fair enough. But the problem is that there are in fact PhD evolutionary scientists, and pointing out that not all scientists are evolutionary biologists doesn't do anything to delegitimize the ones who are.
They just trust and have faith that the other scientists have figured out evolution. It's good enough for them. They don't need to know the evidence.
And that's how it is for virtually everything. Humans as a collective know too much for each and every human to independently validate all that knowledge within a single human lifespan. So you pick things you're going to learn about, and you just trust that the community of people who have picked some particular topic you didn't, and who have spent their whole lives dedicated to that topic, know what they're doing. And if in a particular instance you're not sure they do, you can check.
That's how it works. That would be a whole nother talk. But when you learn this about evidence for creation...
Wow, he claims to have evidence for creation. I've heard a lot of people say that, and none of them have been right to say it. Somehow, I don't think the third Mrs. Sanford here is going to be the one to break that trend.
You'll be better positioned to discuss the controversy than the majority of PhD scientists out there.
I'm pretty sure that's not even possible after a 1-hour talk that'll be mostly lies. But again, let's skip until he gets to a damn point. We get it. He thinks scientists are big dumb because he disagrees with them.
So since we're talking about evolution, we need to define it because this word is used in so many different ways.
Creationists say that, and strictly speaking, they're not wrong. But if you're talking about biological evolution, it's just change in allele frequency over generations or through time. That's it. If you want to talk about something different, like stellar evolution, which is an entirely separate topic, then it's the stages that a star goes through, from initial gravitational collapse all the way to its ultimate fate as a stellar remnant, such as a white dwarf, black hole, or neutron star. Now, I feel like I may want to define an allele. Various regions of the genome do things, like code for proteins, or regulate the production of proteins, and so forth. Each variation in any such region is an allele. So, for example, if we simplify a bit, and just assume that hair color is controlled by one single gene, each variation of it that results in brown, black, red, or blonde hair will be an allele.
For example, they'll talk about the evolution of the phone, how it's changed over the years. And we all know, yes, it's changed. They'll call that evolution.
But no one is calling it biological evolution or stellar evolution or anything like that. No one is using the change in the engineering design for telephones as evidence for universal common ancestry or the history of the universe as a whole.
I don't have a problem with that.
Then why bring it up?
They want to call that evolution, that's fine. That's not what I'm referring to this evening, and that's not what they're teaching in our school systems, but they use that term that way, and that's fine.
We are now 20 minutes into this talk and have not gotten a single actual point in favor of his ideas and that is problematic for science. How is the audience not revolting at this point?
I'm also not referring to different breeds of dogs.
Well, that's weird, because that absolutely is biological evolution. Dogs comprise populations of organisms that reproduce and vary in allele frequency, and even mutate to have new alleles. You can't get different distinct breeds of dog without evolution. Do you think that maybe there is a motive for his exclusion of what is obviously both evolution and undeniably real from his pet definition of evolution? I can think of some reasons, but none of them are what you might call honest. So I guess when it comes to the triangle meme, Jay has chosen young earth creationist, and he has not chosen honest. It remains to be seen whether he has chosen well-informed, but based on the fact that he doesn't have any formal training in this, I'm guessing he only chose young earth creationist.
We got about 350 breeds of dogs on the planet. I'm also not just referring to breeds of cats.
I mean, that's also evolution. I wonder how much evolution he'll just pretend isn't evolution by the time this talk is done. And conversely, how many things that aren't evolution that he'll include. If the only way for you to even make the argument is by redefining the topic, chances are you don't have a good argument. This also applies to John Sanford and Sal Cordova deciding to just change the definition of fitness.
I'm also not just referring to different beaks on finches that Darwin got very excited about.
Well, that's thing number 3 that's evolution that he's not talking about.
These are facts of science.
That's true.
And they're evolution, making evolution, at least in part, a fact of science.
Nobody denies those things.
Okay, well then, I guess everybody is on board with evolution and my work here is done. If you liked this video, please hit like and let me know what you liked in the comments. If you didn't, then hit dislike and let me know what the problem was. Either way, I hope you subscribe and check out the channel memberships and my Patreon. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above.
But those things have nothing
Wait.
to do
What?
with evolution as they're teaching it in the school system.
I knew it couldn't be that easy. Damn it. Kids are taught that evolution is a change in allele frequency in a population over time. Dog breeds, cat breeds, and tanager beak size differences all arise through that exact means. So they are all evolution as it's being taught to kids. Now, that's not all that they're being taught, but it is certainly part of what they're being taught, and rightfully so.
This is what they're teaching in the school system, and this is what I'm referring to this evening.
Well, so far, this looks like a sphere someone dropped into a 3D program and deformed, then made a shader that gets brighter as the angle of incidence to the sphere gets shallower. Look, watch me do the same basic thing in real time in Blender.
Okay, so here we are in Blender 4.5. This is the default scene. We're just going to get rid of everything. We're going to then add in an icosphere. We're going to bring this up to like, I don't know, 4 division seems pretty good. Set this to shade smooth. Then we're going to go over to our modifiers. We're going to add a deform, and we're going to look for displace, new texture. We're going to make this clouds. So over here, go to clouds, cool. We're going to turn the strength down a little bit. There we go. Okay, here comes the actual magic. We're going to go over to the shader editor. New. Don't really need this. We want an emission shader. All right, we're going to make it a funky little green color. All right, then we're going to use a layer weight. Wow, look at that. We can change it to make it look a little bit better. We'll put in a color ramp. And we'll just up that contrast just a little bit. Maybe put it on B-spline. Then I can add in a new tag here. Cool. Now let's make it a little bit more complicated. We'll add in a, we'll make this have a subdivision. Up this up here. Oh look, now it's even more complicated. And if we want to make sure that it's never completely black like it is here, we can just add in a math node on add, and this will set our minimum. So we can say, all right, well, look at that.
They tell us 3.8 billion years ago, non-living chemicals came together to form a living cell, and then that living cell turned itself into every other life form on this planet over millions and millions and millions of actually a few billion years.
Yes, that is also a part of evolution, but that it's not the same part as dog breeds doesn't make dog breeds not part of evolution. Look, making tempered glass with the correct curvature is part of making a car, and it doesn't stop being part of making a car because you want to talk about how body panels are attached to the chassis. It's fine to want to talk about universal common ancestry and not say about breeding in domesticated animals, but pretending that that makes one of them not evolution is just lying or profound ignorance.
That's what they're teaching as evolution. They're teaching it as a fact, typically. I call it a story, and I'm not trying to be condescending or sarcastic or disrespectful.
Well, it is a fact and a story. Those categories are not mutually exclusive. A fact, in this case, is something that is so likely to be true that to reject it would be perverse. A story is a narrative about a set of events that proceeds from a beginning to a middle to an end. So if a story is relating only true things, then the story as a whole is in fact a fact. For example, if I told you the story of how I got up this morning, took a shower, grabbed some coffee, found out that a guy I had reacted to on Vishanti's story was also a violent kidnapper and child abuser according to the Oregon courts, and then sat down to write the script, that story would be a fact.
I'm being literal. It is a story. They weren't there. They didn't see it happen. They are telling a story of what they imagined happened millions of years ago.
Stories have nothing to do with whether the storyteller was there or not, nor does the storyteller having been there or not tell us whether the story is true. This is just basic what the words mean.
We also call this molecules to man evolution.
Yes, he calls it that, as do many other pseudoscientists. But no real scientists call it that, because the formation of life and the evolution of life are not the same thing. Evolution is something that happens in populations with heritability and imperfect reproduction. The origin of life didn't involve such populations, and so while there are some overlapping mechanisms, such as selection, they are not the same thing. Evolution is something that only occurs after life has come about, and it doesn't really matter how that life originates. If it originated by God speaking it into existence, by Q stirring a pool of amino acids, or by the old one seeding life across the galaxy while building the webway, evolution still works, common ancestry is still true, and humans are still filthy monkey men.
I would highly recommend you use that phrase.
I wouldn't, because it's a dead giveaway that you either have no clue what you're talking about, or that you're a liar.
If you just tell someone you don't believe in evolution, they're going to think you're crazy.
No, I won't think you're crazy. I'll assume that you're badly misinformed. That's why I didn't believe in evolution. And for most people, it's a far better explanation. Believing something that's false isn't the same as being crazy or delusional. Delusions happen when an obviously false belief that is not one generally accepted is believed despite all evidence to the contrary and maintained despite new evidence to the contrary, usually through tortured rationalizations. Most people are not doing that when they don't believe in evolution. They don't know the evidence and usually are in spaces where rejection of evolution is normal and not questioned. In that sort of case, not believing in evolution is the normal thing to do.
Why? Because we see change all the time.
No, if you say you don't believe in evolution, people won't interpret that as you not believing in change. They'll correctly interpret that as you not believing in the basic foundational fact and theory of all of biology, biological evolution. That's because evolution is not generally used as a simple synonym for change in English. Because the only people who typically say things like, I don't believe in evolution, are creationists of various kinds, and they mean biological evolution, and sometimes other things from science that they reject, like the Big Bang or stellar evolution.
What just happened here? It's technically called equivocation. You said two things equal that are not equal. Evolution and change.
Near as I can tell, no one is doing that, except possibly Jay, since he seems to think that things that definitely are evolution aren't, and I'm guessing he's going to call them change. But technically, he hasn't done that yet, so at this point, there still seems to be no equivocation going on. Now, it is the case that universal common ancestry and the actual process of biological evolution are often called evolution, which can be confusing in some contexts, but that's an example of a word having more than one meaning, which is not in itself equivocation, although it's needed for equivocation to occur.
Now, evolution would involve change, but it's not just any kind of change. It's a very specific kind of change that makes things more complex and adds new information.
No, that's not what it is. Evolution can do those things, but it doesn't have to be evolution. Anytime the allele frequency in a population varies over time, that's evolution. Now, that might be variation in ways that lead to more complexity, but it could also be variation that leads to less. As for information, since I don't know what Seegert means by that word, and since most creationists themselves don't know what they mean by that, I'll just use the definition which is actually measurable. That is, the amount of genetic material in the genomes of the members of a population. In that case, duplications and insertions create information, but deletions reduce information, and both are part of evolution. So evolution both increases and decreases information in genomes. We're already off the rails, and the talk has barely begun. This is why it's important to not just define your terms, but to use definitions that are actually recognizable to people who know the subject that you're talking about. If I decided to give a talk about chess, and I define check as any time either the king, queen, or white bishop is under threat of capture on your opponent's next turn, I would not be talking about what actual chess players are talking about when they say check, even though what they mean is also in my definition. My definition would mean that virtually nothing I said about check would correspond to anything in the reality of chess as it is played in the real world. Similarly, by getting what evolution is fundamentally wrong, J. Seegert's talk is almost guaranteed to have little or nothing to do with what evolution actually is, how it works, how we know about it, or what the evidence for it is.
We never see that kind of change.
Yes, we do. We saw it in real time in the Lenski long-term E. coli experiment, where the bacteria in the experiment added new genes and a whole new regulatory pathway. That's adding both complexity and information. And since he likes dogs have added new genes and new facial muscles compared to wild wolves to help them communicate with humans and eat starchy human food. That's an increase in both complexity and information right there. Wolves can't eat a starch-heavy diet and be healthy because they can't effectively digest carbohydrates. They get very few calories from them because they don't produce enough amylase to break down carbs efficiently. Dogs, on the other hand, have extra amylase genes that express in more parts of the body, including the salivary glands, which allows them to derive far more calories from foods like grains. Also, you know that adorable, sad puppy dog look that makes you want to give your dog whatever he or she wants? Yeah, that's a result of facial muscles around the eye that no other canids have.
So, if you say you don't believe in evolution, the skeptic will think you deny change, and they're going to think you're crazy, and they should.
No, they won't. At least they won't think that you deny change broadly. They might think that you're crazy, I suppose, but I won't.
So don't just say you don't believe in evolution, say you don't believe in molecules to man evolution.
Or better yet, if you really need to be specific, say that you don't believe in biological evolution.
You don't believe that dead, non-living molecules came together to form a living cell.
That's how living cells come together every time they form. Leaving aside the matter that dead means something that was once alive and that these chemicals are inanimate, not dead, all cells are composed of non-living chemicals. Those chemicals are assembled into new cells every time any new cell is made. That's how cells work. The question of origin of life research is how can and did that happen if there was no cell to facilitate it in the first place? But the bare fact that living cells are composed of non-living chemicals is just inarguable.
And then that cell turned itself into every other life form, including human beings.
No, that cell didn't transform itself, it reproduced. And the daughter cells were not identical to the parent cell. Some of the changes to the daughter cells helped those cells proliferate in different environments, and so life diverged into different species, a process which continued for billions of years, eventually leading to modern life. But that original cell is long gone, and it was long gone even by the time the last common ancestor of all extant life evolved.
Now, here's a general premise of this talk. Certain things look pretty good from a certain angle or certain distance, like this bright red BMW. You envision opening the hood and seeing a beautiful engine there. What if you open the hood and you saw this? The engine's missing. A bunch of wires are hanging there. So what looked pretty good at first, upon closer inspection, doesn't look so good anymore.
Then it's not a very good car. Do we really need an analogy for this? I guess, who am I to talk? I make analogies all the time.
That's what we're going to see with evolution. And it doesn't take much imagination to envision evolution occurring as they teach it in the school system.
Is the implication here that something that is easy to imagine is likely false? I'm not sure what he's getting at. I suppose I'll let him cook.
You can use your imagination. For example, we've got two creatures here, a snake and a lizard.
Couple things. Snakes are lizards, so saying you have a snake and a lizard is a bit like saying you have a dog and a dachshund. Second, that's not a lizard, that's a salamander. Specifically, the snake is a dark morph Burmese python, Python bivitatus, and the salamander is the fire salamander, Salamandra salamandra. In case you're wondering, reptiles did not evolve from salamanders.
These two creatures are not completely different.
That's true, they're both tetrapods, tetrapods being a group of mostly terrestrial lobe-finned fish that share adaptations to breathe air efficiently that generally lack any form of gill as an adult, and that at some point in development have 4 limb buds.
There are a number of similarities there. It doesn't take much imagination to envision bumps starting to form in that snake.
It doesn't require any imagination. Here's an actual photograph of a snake with legs. They're simple legs, but also legs didn't evolve from limbless snakes growing legs. They evolved from the fins of lobe-finned fish. Snakes lost their legs. They're not the ancestral no-limb form.
And then the bumps get bigger and bigger and bigger and longer, and they kind of evolve into the legs of the lizard.
Which again, isn't a lizard. It's so much a salamander that its Latin name means salamander. It was described by Linnaeus in 1758. This isn't just a salamander, it's the salamander.
Just small little changes over millions and millions of years.
But not those changes. Those changes are a straw man of the history of limb development in tetrapods.
That doesn't take much imagination, and that's, again, what they're teaching in the school.
I can guarantee you that no school is teaching kids that salamanders evolved from snakes growing legs.
But if you were to pop the hood to look inside these creatures to see what has to happen in the DNA, that's when you find out that can't happen.
That's a fun assertion. I wonder if he'll bother to back it up any. My money is on no.
So we're going to be popping the hood throughout this talk.
That sounds like a euphemism. I'm not sure for what, but if you come up with an idea for what it is a euphemism for, put it in the comments. I know I have an audience that's much more creative than I am, especially collectively. I'm sure we can come up with some really good options for what pop that hood might mean.
Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins. I am so sick of having to talk about that shit stain. Not only is he a bigot, he's also probably the worst thing to happen to the philosophy of religion in the past couple of centuries. The God delusion was such a disaster, and that was before he just came out as a raging transphobe and Islamophobe.
Arguably the world's leading atheist?
Very arguably. I'm not sure what it would mean to be the world's leading atheist. It's not like there are atheism Olympics and he got the gold medal, or that there are atheist rankings like there are in chess and he's got the highest number of atheism points.
I like Richard Dawkins. I appreciate his being pretty straightforward as an atheist. He just says it like it is, and I appreciate that. He probably wouldn't like me, that's fine.
He actually might like Jay. He's taken to calling himself a cultural Christian, and I'm sure that he and Jay here share some bigotries that they could discuss over a pint of beer. Who he probably wouldn't like is me or my supporters, who are either supportive of trans rights or just trans. And by the way, if you're not supportive of trans rights, I don't need your support. If you don't think that my friends, supporters, and loved ones should be allowed to exist, you can just leave. No, I don't want to debate it with you, because when the options are someone who just wants to exist in a way that both harms no one and reduces their mental anguish, and you want to stop that, there is no debate to be had. I won't debate the validity or existence of people who just want to try to live their lives.
But this is one thing that he said. You cannot be both sane and well-educated and disbelieve in evolution.
I agree, although I would add that you can lie about it and be both sane and well-educated. Also, it feels gross to agree with Richard Dawkins. Surely someone has expressed this sentiment who didn't then go on to deny the science about sex and deny the humanity of others.
The evidence is so strong that any sane, educated person has got to believe in evolution.
Yes, or they need to lie. Lying seems to be a very common tactic among those who make it their business to spread anti-science ideas.
Very dogmatic, intimidating statement from a pretty intelligent scientist.
No, it's not dogmatic at all. If it were dogmatic, it wouldn't be about evidence, because dogmas are those beliefs that are held regardless of evidence, or which are required to belong to some organization, generally a religious one, although it could also be a political or even a fandom group. Dawkins' statement isn't any of those things. A dogmatic belief isn't the same thing as a well-evidenced belief, or a belief that's strongly held to. But of course, dogma often has a bad connotation, and so Jay is capitalizing on that and using that reputation to suggest that all the bad things about dogma can be applied to Dawkins' position, while ignoring the fact that between the two of them regarding evolution, it is Jay who is in fact the one being dogmatic.
So again, imagine your children or grandchildren sitting in a classroom hearing the professor or teacher saying something like this.
That would be a really weird thing for a teacher to say. Teachers are there to make sure that students understand the material, not so much that they accept it as true. I know, I have taken classes where I disagreed about the conclusions of the professor or teacher teaching the class. They didn't really try to convince me otherwise, at least not during class time.
How are you going to push back? If you say you don't believe in evolution, you're announcing to everyone around you, I'm one of these insane, crazy people.
No, you're more likely telling people that you're not well educated. In fact, the part I disagree with Dawkins on about this topic is that I find it is far more likely that those who reject evolution are in fact immoral or poorly educated, rather than that they are insane in some way. I find very little evidence that would suggest a mental disorder in most creationists, apart from some of them who seem to be narcissists like Kent Hovind. And far more often, I find that they are just bad people who are happy to lie, as long as they can say they did it for Jesus.
I deny science, I just believe the Bible.
Way to tell on yourself, Jay.
So most of the students become very quiet, and right now about 77% of Christian youth are walking away from their faith during college.
If your religion can't survive basic science education, then it's probably time to get a new one. And that doesn't even mean that you have to get rid of Christianity. There are plenty of varieties of Christianity that aren't out there denying demonstrable facts of science.
Even if they don't go to college, about that time in their life, they're walking away.
Wow, they can't even keep people when they don't find out that so much of what they were taught about the history of the world was just lies. Maybe instead of doubling down on lies, fundamentalist evangelicals should take a long look at themselves and figure out what it is about their religion that is repelling people. Maybe it's the bigotry. Maybe it's the science denial. I don't know. I'm not here to rehabilitate the Christian denominations currently trying to kill pregnant people and push anyone who isn't cisgendered and heterosexual back into the closet in the best case scenario. But hey, maybe those very things might need some introspection, evangelical Christians.
Partially because they were handed a set of beliefs without convictions. So that's a whole nother talk that I'm not giving this evening.
Ah yes, they're leaving because we don't browbeat them hard enough. I'm sure that's the reason.
Proverbs 18:17 says the first one to plead his cause seems right, until his neighbor comes along and examines him. We've all been in that position before where you hear something and you're thinking, you can't argue with that. But someone else comes along and says, well, wait a minute. Did you know about this or that or that? Oh, no, I didn't know about that. Okay, I guess this thing doesn't sound so good anymore. Well, I kind of jokingly say Evolution 1:1 says the only one to plead his cause seems right, because no one else is allowed to challenge him or present other views.
No, everyone has a chance. To plead the case against evolution, you have to go to the scientific literature with your data. Creationism already did that over a century ago. It failed. It was assigned to the dustbin of scientific history with the phlogiston theory of fire, the miasma theory of disease, geocentrism, the steady-state universe, and the luminous first ether. These were the dominant paradigms in their respective fields of study for decades or centuries. Phlogiston was replaced by the oxygen theory of fire, miasma was replaced by the germ theory of disease, geocentrism was replaced with heliocentrism, and while that has been replaced with a barycentric model, it's so close to being true that we teach it. The steady-state universe has been replaced with the Big Bang, and the lambda CDM model. The luminiferous ether has been replaced by relativity. Special creation has been replaced by evolution. If you want to bring back any of those now long discarded ideas, you're going to have to do it with data, and not from a church pulpit or classroom. The fact is that for the most part, creationists don't even try.
This is what we have in our public school system. They're only presenting one view. So of course it's going to seem plausible.
Yes, until you're getting a degree beyond primary education, the goal of schools is to teach the broadly accepted consensus. Until creationists can change that consensus, then their ideas should not be taught in science or history classrooms.
And if a student raises their hand and says, well, what about creation? Oh, thank you for bringing that up. See, now that's a religious view. And separation of church and state. You're here in the school system to learn truth. This is a science classroom. We're going to teach you what's true. You want to learn about creation. That's a mythical thing. You can read the Bible or something like that, but this is a science class, and we talk about truth. The scientists have proven evolution.
I can't say that response would never be given, but it is not the correct or most likely response. The response is more likely to be, that isn't part of the science standards, and so we do not teach it. But if you want to discuss that, we can do it outside of classroom time. Science standards aren't going to be changed by a student disrupting science class. Again, if creationists want their ideas taught in science classrooms, then they have to start getting scientific backing for those ideas without telling lies. I happen to think that's impossible, so it's not going to happen. But hey, creationists, I'd love to be proven wrong about that.
If they ever find out there's another option, they'll let us know, but they've already proven evolution is true.
Other than quibbles about using the word prove in regards to science, yes, if the scientists now find an actual option that isn't evolution to explain biodiversity and population genetics, not only will they let you know, there will be some Nobel Prizes coming and huge press releases. You'll know if that happens.
Here's an interesting quote from Dr. Eugenie Scott. She's now the former executive director of the National Center for Science Education. This was an organization that was drafted to combat biblical creation.
Specifically, it was created to oppose efforts to get creationism into science classrooms because not only is it a violation of the Establishment Clause of the formerly enforced Constitution of the United States of America, and thereby would be illegal if any country under that document still existed, which was the case when the organization was established, but also because creationism isn't science and so does not belong in a science classroom, regardless of any legal questions.
And this is what she said. In my opinion, using creation and evolution topics as critical thinking skills or exercises in primary and secondary schools is virtually guaranteed to confuse the students about evolution and may lead them to reject it.
I never thought about that. Seems plausible. I'm sure other people, including some of you watching, know far more about pedagogy than I do, and so would be far better equipped than I am to assess this statement. If you are someone with a background in teaching, let me know what you think of Scott's statement.
What is she saying? She said, we can't teach both views. That might lead some students to reject evolution. We can't have that. We can't allow that. So we're only going to teach one view.
Okay.
How can you teach critical thinking if you're only giving one option? They have nothing to compare it to.
Creationism, as believed by fundamentalist evangelicals, is not the other option in a dichotomy with evolution. In fact, here's an example of a question that could be used for homework or classwork to get a student to think critically about evolution. John says that sharks and dolphins must be very closely related based on their overall body shape and the similarities between the shape and placement of their fins or flippers. Maria disagrees and says that those aspects are convergent and that dolphins and sharks differ in many significant ways. Discuss who is more likely correct and why you have come to that conclusion. The question could also attach anatomical diagrams of the two animals in question. There you go. You had contrasting views about evolution in a question that requires critical thinking.
So that's how they get away with it. They're not going to contrast in whether things happen by themselves or they didn't.
No, the dichotomy he's proposing is whether things happened according to natural law or by miracle.
And they could teach it that way. They don't need to teach in the classroom that God created Adam and Eve in the garden and Adam and Eve sinned and got kicked out and all that. But they could teach, you got two options. Either everything came into existence by itself or didn't.
Well, since we have no evidence of supernatural agency in biology, teaching that as an option would just be making things up which are untestable. That's kind of the opposite of what science does.
Is that a religious statement? No, that's logic.
But it can also be used for literally anything. Maybe things fall down on their own because of gravity, or maybe someone pushes them down. Maybe weather happens on its own as a result of fluid dynamics and energy from the sun, or maybe someone is making it rain through magic. Maybe computers execute tasks by themselves via electricity, circuits, and math, or maybe each one has a tiny little demon inside that tells your monitors what to show. Maybe wildfires start by themselves in hot, dry environments and then spread all on their own. Or maybe they're actually started by Jewish space lasers that for some reason are targeting suburban homes and commercial districts. Why are these any less valid to teach? I don't think they are, but I bet Seegert wouldn't want any of them taught except maybe the Jewish space laser thing. I'd say there's a very good chance he thinks that's a plausible thing.
And then the rest of the semester, they can just do good science, and the students can decide, does what we just discussed today in class support the idea everything happened by itself, or didn't?
It's going to broadly support the consensus view, because the consensus view got to be that way by having the most evidence and the best predictive power.
They could do that, but they won't.
Right, because it's stupid and confusing for the children.
Teacher one view, we know it all happened for no reason all by itself.
No, what we know is that evolution occurred and all evidence is compatible with it happening according to impersonal physical processes, and there is currently no reason to think that an outside agency is required to explain anything about it. I don't know if that means all by itself and without God or whatever, but that's what we know, and that's what we should teach.
So, we don't have time to go over the big picture. I cover it in some of my other talks, but if we were to touch on the big picture, we would discuss the origin of a bunch of things, like the origin of stuff.
We are right now 26 and a half minutes into a talk about this. The talk itself is an hour and a half long. We have plenty of time, but for some reason, Jay used nearly the whole first 50 minutes on autobiographical nonsense and advertisements for his ministry and Grand Canyon tours. If he thought this stuff was important, he could have talked about it. But what he thought was more important was his own ego and making money by lying to tourists. Also, I want to point out that this talk is supposed to be about whether evolution is probable, and we haven't discussed that at all, even though we're almost a third of the way through the talk.
Matter and energy. Like, okay, where'd stuff come from?
Energy seems to have always existed in some form or another, although it is possible that the total sum vector of all energy in the universe is actually zero, in which case it can simply come into existence from fluctuations in various quantum fields. Stuff by which I assume he means matter is itself made of energy, and so it came from the energy.
There's an entire massive universe out there. Like, if there's no God, please tell me how it came from. I got a series on the origin of the universe.
I just want to point out what happened there. Of the universe, he started with a question. Please tell me how it... and then launched right into a commercial for his cosmology series. Amazing. I don't think I've ever seen a creationist speaker who was so nakedly interested in advertising his own stuff. Although, to be fair, he is offering those videos for free, so it's not just money he's looking for. I'm skipping his commercial, of course.
So you talk about the origin of stuff, and then once you have the origin of stuff, how does it organize itself into stars, galaxies, and planets?
Gravity.
The laws of physics mitigate against that.
Hey, guys, gravity isn't a law of physics anymore. Interesting news. Odd that I'm hearing about it on a low-quality live stream from some church and not, the news and physics journals.
And once you have stars, galaxies, and planets, how do you get dead chemicals to come together to form a living cell?
I don't know, but people are working on it, and they are making progress. But what we don't have is evidence of intelligent agents making it happen in the deep past. If creationists obtain evidence, then they should present it for peer review. What they should not do is just declare that until we know, it must be not just a god, but theirs specifically. Also, I want to note that as his picture to illustrate life, he has a virus, which is not seen as living by many biologists, so it's an odd choice, especially given that he could have chosen a bacterium or something.
And then you talk about the variety of life. Once you have a living cell, how does it turn itself into the millions of species we have today?
Mutation, natural selection, genetic drift, horizontal gene transfer, etc. Evolution. The thing we're supposed to be talking about based on the title of this talk, which is Evolution, Probable or Problematic, but which we've talked about very little. Gee, I hope I don't have to keep repeating this answer.
We're going to focus more so on this last one here, the origin of species, in a sense, the variety of life. How do you take a single-celled organism and turn it into every other life form, including human beings?
Mutation, natural selection, genetic drift, horizontal gene transfer, etc. Evolution. the thing we're supposed to be talking about based on the title of this talk, which is Evolution, Probable or Problematic, but which we've talked about very little. Okay, I think this is actually a good place to stop for now. I don't think we have time to really dig into the actual evolution portion of this today, so let's call it a little early and come back next time to see what he has to say about evolution. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please hit like on this video and tell me what you liked in the comments. If you didn't like it, then hit dislike and let me know what the problem was. Either way, please subscribe if you haven't and turn on all notifications so that occasionally YouTube might tell you about my content if they feel like it, regardless of your wishes. And remember, if you want to support what I do, please consider joining the channel memberships or the Patreon. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovand, Tapioca Weasel, Max Cherry, North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, Sphincter of Doom, Regios, Landon, Ian Chen, Eleron Teller, Phil Gavara, Kelvin Brostic Van Manen, Joshua Geese, Volis, Dan Sheedy, The Plastic Mouse, Arrow Dodger, and Gordon Loves Science. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 15% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.